It actually doesn't matter of how brilliant you are, your IQ, your education, like all of that, even your status. Like when you enter a meeting, the credibility comes from how letting go is about.
When you're on a bike ride and it's going downhill, well, take a break, get your energy back,
That is so
right?
true.
When you're going downhill, you don't give 100% and you try to go even faster downhill so that it's going up again. No.
I
And
love
I
it.
think in economy, that means during a downturn, we're busier than ever before.
Mm.
Less time to think, less time to create
Mm.
beyond the job.
Because when we deal with people, right, it feels
Mm.
so emotionally messy that we feel like we're not making any progress. So we feel like we're slowing down the progress when in actually he obsesses over the human part. Like, how do people feel?
Oh,
Yeah.
I
And you
love
know
it.
what he did during that crisis for the people that he laid off? They say that data is the language of business. To step into the future and manage uncertainty requires that we actually expand our thinking beyond data. We're about to explore how we can do that by letting go. And so you may be wondering, wait, hold on a second. What do you mean letting go? I understand the data driven part. I'm not too sure about the letting go part, right? And it's safe to say at this point, enough of the conversation in life has evolved around the technical side of this transformation of this digital era. But there's now room for more conversation to unfold around the humanness of how we're leading change and uncertainty in business. And so knowing when to let go, when to step in is a skill that young leaders need to have to speed up decision making and really tap into that collective intelligence of their teams in their companies, because in order to utilize data requires more collaboration because we're dealing with more complexity. So hi everyone, this is Helena.
And Philip, and you're listening to an exclusive series on growth of the Where Boundaries Dissolve podcast.
This is a podcast on transformation. So we get better on unleashing what makes us unique so we can stand in our power and take our roles in society and in business to the next level to make this world a better place.
Love it. I'm excited to talk about this topic today, letting go. As a German who moved across the world to work here in Silicon Valley and who works in tech, um, Germany's top 40 under 40, I've been exposed to a lot of uncertainty, growth moments, but also pressure. And especially in the last years, ever since COVID happened, we had a downturn, we had different sectors that went up and down. So yeah, I'm ready to unpack this today.
Same. So that's a good entry point. That's a great segue, right? Because like we are under a lot of pressure, right? The
Oh
data
yeah.
has also opened up this bracket where immense amount of competition, whatever market you're in, whatever industry you're in, it's just really opened up, and all of these startups coming, new ideas. There's bigger ecosystems. We talk about ecosystem thinking, and there's all of these great opportunities, but then there's also the reality of there is a lot more threat, and there is a lot more pressure, as you were saying, and there is a lot of like need to speed things up.
Yeah.
And it seems counterproductive to let go in those moments when you're actually under pressure, right? Is that what you're experiencing? Is that juxtaposition of like, okay, what is actually letting go help me with, and how am I at the same time speeding things up and letting teams do what they need to?
Yeah, I honestly almost see a reflection of what we saw in the Industrial Revolution back then,
Mm-hmm.
where we had technology accelerate our efficiency so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
We started to produce cars in series. And what happened to the humans in that period was that people were in a factory doing the same thing for 10 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So we had an insane acceleration in technology, but it did lead to way more work for humans. And I think we're seeing the same thing right now with the adoption of technology and virtual work,
Mm-hmm.
where we have these tools now. We work virtually in OneDrive and PowerPoint files. We have Slack, Teams. We're always connected. So the technology has the potential to make us better. But I think the question is, what does better mean? Does it mean more efficient or more effective? And effective means doing the right things, and then efficient means doing the things right. And
Mm-hmm.
what you just said, Helena, letting go,
Mm-hmm.
for me in my day-to-day job means to be strong enough to say, I take this 2-hour block
Mm-hmm.
and I take myself away from all that technology, and I let all the things sit in my head, because that's where my creativity comes from. That's where my real outcome for the work comes from. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I would be really interested in your perspective and how you handle it in your day-to-day job, also maybe in the personal life.
Mm-hmm.
It's constant on, technology is there, but yeah, humans are not very technological in their core.
No, and I think just to build on what you're saying, I think there's something that happens when we are pressured that we actually grip even more, that we hold on and try to control even more. And we
True.
try to hide behind the data because it's so hard to make a decision and to make the right decision, especially coming out of this era, right? The industrial times where things were set up during the industrial revolutions, the existing structures that we have. And now it's like, no, we need more collaboration. We need more experimentation. It's a 180-degree shift in how we do things, right? And so
Yeah.
letting go doesn't mean to me like leaning back and not having a structure and letting the teams do it. On the contrary, it actually means setting your teams up with amazing structures so that they can, test and learn and iterate faster. And for me, letting go, I think, and I'm putting this out there, I'm not sure, but based on the conversations that I've had on my podcast, I've had the tremendous opportunity to speak to a lot of ambitious and driven people. And there's one common phenomena with driven and successful people is they're not very patient. And
Hmm. I would agree
they're
with that
eager to get things
100%.
done.
Yeah.
And so there's this need to go and figure it out, right? And there's a need to oversee how things are going, and because you're so excited to
Hmm.
to get the thing done and to see how it goes.
Yeah.
And for me, I kind of fall into the same category, and it's been extremely hard to come into meetings with an assumption, but not to expect people to just follow what where I'm thinking, even if I know that my idea and the way to go about things is probably the right way. And I know that sounds like a little selfish, but like I have a background in design thinking, and I was working in a very traditional setup where there was not much of an understanding of how to bring the voice of the customer in. So I had a very clear understanding of how to go about these things, how to test and build a prototype and all these things, how to do customer interviews. But I was entering into a context where there was no such understanding. So whatever I was saying was kind of meeting and hitting a wall, but I
Mm.
knew I needed to do it and make it a team effort in order for us to actually do the things, right? And so entering a meeting with more openness, for me, the letting go part was not trying to control the process so much, but understanding the learning process that I was asking people to embark on with me. And so what I learned letting go is really like, where are people? Where do they stand right now? And meeting them where they're at, and then trying to like softly pitch them on an alternative approach of doing things and why it would matter to them, what they would gain from this. And it took me like a long time. Like the first year in my job as a product manager,
It
I
was
was
hard.
all I was just hitting a wall. I was just this, and I would try this and nothing would stick. And I was like, okay. And then what really changed was like, okay, I take a small little area with the people that I was collaborating with, and I suggested that we just test it, try it out, see how it works. And that worked really well. We had a place that there was not much, we didn't have much skin in the game. It didn't really matter how successful the project was going to be, but we worked in an agile way. We brought in the voice of the customer. And then suddenly people were like, okay, I see how this could
It's
be,
good work.
you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, and so this really, and a guy on my podcast, he said it really well the other day. He says, when you're dealing with uncertainty, it's really about think big, test small, fail fast, learn always. And I
That's what we
think
say in Silicon Valley as well. 100%.
yeah.
Always.
And so
Yeah.
it's like, how small can you get so
Hmm.
that people will trust you and will try it out and will dip their toes in?
Hmm.
And that's been my experience of
Hmm.
letting go and trying to be more creative in how I mobilize people under an idea
Hmm.
and a
And
vision.
then how did that feel for you personally when you were able to let go of that control? When you, I would say, you leveled your expectations a little bit for these initial meetings and you found a different approach. How was that from like your personal experience?
I mean, I was working through this with a coach, and he was kind of like, you're gonna have to like change your strategy here, even if you think and you sit on such a high horse of what you think is the right thing to do, you're gonna have to meet people where they're at. And at first, I felt like I was dumbing myself down. I'm not gonna lie. Like it feels super silly to say that now, but I was just like, oh my God, like this is the way to do it. I learned it in my master's studies. Like, oh my God, my job is the growth journey is not there because we're not actually doing the things the right way, right? And so I felt like I was actually dumbing myself down. And that was my first impression. So I kind of have like had this like attitude of like, whatever, this job is
Hmm.
nothing. And then in hindsight, I realized that that was actually the core skill of the job, was to get people to work with you. And I was like, oh, and I had a huge aha moment that it actually
Hmm.
doesn't matter of how brilliant you are, your IQ, your education, like all of that, even your status, like when you enter a meeting, even if you have like the biggest status or title or whatever, the credibility comes from how you meet people and how
Yeah.
you deal with them and how you lead them. And that was like my biggest aha moment, I think. Letting go is about letting go from my worldview and trying to get curious about other people's worldview, I think.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Very, very good point. I think that's a good learning for a couple listeners that I know who listen to the podcast and who are struggling with this in their job, sometimes in the relationship. I think this is really something. Meet people where they are currently, show empathy, and
Mm-hmm.
then you can grow together, even if it means half a step back for you as an individual. I think
Yeah.
that's a good takeaway also for me. Thanks
Yeah.
for sharing.
I mean, how do you meet people? I feel like you're extremely emotionally intelligent. How do you meet people where they're at and not let because when we deal with people, right, it feels
Mm.
so emotionally messy that we feel like we're not making any progress. So we feel like we're slowing down the progress when in actually we're accelerating it because we're getting everyone aligned and on board and all the things.
So first of all, I got the feedback that I'm not really patient a couple of times in my professional career.
Uh-huh.
And I saw that as a huge problem, like especially in the past 16 months where the economy was kind of it wasn't really going down, but it also wasn't really going up. And being patient, I think, is a core skill right there because you have to be strategic and patient. And it's not something that I am mastering. But more specifically to your question, I think I can definitely take a learning from what you just shared. I think my style of work is more like a pushing force in this situation,
Mm-hmm.
where when I believe something is right, I I do spend some time on getting people together and getting people on the same page. Absolutely. What helped me a lot is to always start with the problem. So
Mm,
even though I know the solution already to whether it's an internal problem, a customer, external problem, I pretty much make it very clear and data driven that there is a problem. So I usually start whatever it is. You talked about customer discovery, but sometimes it's also an internal discovery.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And whenever I want to convince people to join me, I show them facts.
mm-hmm,
And based on those facts, my experience is that the conversation is very different from that point onwards.
mm-hmm,
Because
mm-hmm.
people usually they don't disagree with facts. What my assumption would be here right now is if you combine facts with actual empathy, like you just described it, I think that would be a win-win.
So I had the storytellers on the podcast.
Hmm.
Storytellers is a change and transformation agency, and they do story driven change. So they use story to build vision and to mobilize people under that vision so that they can execute on the strategy, right? That's the goal of every company. Unfortunately, during change, a lot of companies fail at,
Yep.
at doing that. And so they do that very successfully. And they say, actually, we argue with facts in our brains. We're constantly listening to you and saying, I agree, I disagree, I agree, I disagree. And it's so easy for us to do that with facts. But here's the
That's
thing.
interesting. So we
Yeah,
actually doubt it and we question it.
all the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
all the time. And that's the power of story.
That's the German in me. I think I'm different.
No, but I mean, I don't know. I think there's an opportunity for you to explore story
Yeah.
because when we sit at, if we go and we get a beer with our friends, you're not telling them, oh, 3 meetings out of 2 were successful and for this reason. You will tell what happened during the meeting. You'll give them a little more context. You'll tell them a story.
Hmm.
That's how we explain the world to each other. We're always telling stories. And for whatever reason, we stop doing that in business because we don't take the time, we don't think about it, we don't always have all the stories. Sometimes it's even hard to tell the stories, right? Because it requires, when we're with friends, we feel that there's an intimate connection, there's a trust level. Why should I be sharing my story with whoever in the organization, right? There's a multitude of factors why we don't do that. And what I found very interesting with what you were saying is like you allow it to be customer, like you bring the customer problem. In a sense, that's a story too. You're talking about the customer problem, you're giving them context, you're explaining their world, and you're telling them simultaneously why they should care about this problem.
Mhm.
And so while it is data driven, like there is customer data in it, you're probably packaging it in a story. And that's why that works really well.
I would agree with that.
I
Yeah.
would actually go even further and say that's like super powerful for cross-functional collaboration. It's the only way that you can actually mobilize cross-functional teams under a vision because everyone has a different view on the customer problem, right? And so
Mhm.
if you're actually giving them the journey and the problem and you can define consensus on there, that's what's going to help people move forward. So I think
Yeah.
you're probably doing already a really good job.
Well, I would agree with that, but you can always get better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I want to explore a little bit on that topic, I already pointed it out a tiny bit, that we had, since 2020, we had wild years in business. I think
Hmm.
for everyone, it was constant change. Get out of the office, get back to the office, do it hybrid, then you're back to traveling, but you get Teams invites while you're on the flight. So we are in constant stress right now. And then at the same time, in many industries, we did see actually the economy slow down. And one thing I would like to discuss that I realized over the past 2 years is many people completely overestimate how much control they as an individual actually have over the situation.
Yeah. 100%.
That's like one major thing I observed is when your market is going down,
Hmm.
it's going down. And whether you come from a 50 to a 100-hour work week, and you maybe sacrifice health, relationships, the influence that you have as an individual, and then let's make it bigger as a company.
Hmm.
If your market or if the economy is in a downturn,
Hmm.
that was like a major learning where I saw, whether it's in big tech or whether it's in other fields,
Hmm.
where people were just grinding so hard
Hmm.
and nothing
Yeah.
changed. That's another point I want to bring up is
Wow.
take a step back and look at the bigger picture,
Hmm.
and then estimate how much control do I have, how much control do we have.
Hmm.
And sometimes, actually, that's a quote from my mom. She said, when you're on a bike ride and it's going downhill, well, take a break, get your energy back,
That is so true.
right? You when you're going downhill, you don't give 100% and you try to go even faster downhill so that it's going up again. No, you actually enjoy the view for a second. You manage everything right so that when you have the next hill coming, you are there 100%.
I
And
love
I
it.
think in economy, that means during a downturn, try to keep your cost low, focus on what you can do to get through this downturn, but then be ready because the market is going to come back, and then you want to be 100% recovered and you want to go all in.
I love that so much. I actually talked about that on my solo, the first one that I released.
Love it.
And the analogy I brought is like it actually happens in nature too.
Oh,
Like
now I'm interested.
water tortoises, when they're swimming out to sea, the
Mhm.
waves will like give them a push out to sea. And then when the waves go back, it kind of pulls them back. And then they get another little push and then they pull back. And the way they actually make it out to sea is that they swim and they paddle when the current comes with them. And then they just kind of sit when the current pulls them back. And then they paddle again so they go with the energy.
So
They
they're actually
go,
smarter than humans
yeah,
in
yeah.
that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're just like, oh my God, where are we going? Let's just paddle.
Yeah, when I go surfing, I definitely don't feel what they feel. I just try to get out there. And it's
Really?
exhausting. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I see exactly. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. But I think we just feel like because of our value and we're so afraid of knowing whether we're worthy of recognition and validation when
Hmm.
things are not working very well. So
Hmm.
we just buckle down and work even harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's exactly where that comes from, is all that fear.
Yeah. And we don't take that step back. We're like, no, I have to get this right. We have to get this right. And we have to get it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I don't know. Sometimes it might work, but sometimes it's just there are forces out there, microeconomics, macroeconomics, that are very hard to fight.
Are there times in your professional life where you've been able to apply that successfully?
Hmm, that's a difficult point. I think one of the aspects we just discussed, yes,
Mhm,
and that is focusing on the future.
mhm,
Like in a situation where, and I had that professionally, where it's not going perfectly, I was able to take myself a little bit out of that immediate fight, and I focused on what can we do now in
mhm,
order to be better as soon as this is over.
mhm,
And so far, it was also pretty, let's say, appreciated,
mhm.
because when you have 95% of your company fighting and killing it still,
Right.
like
Yeah.
doing the best possible, I think it's good if 5% of the people say, okay, you guys got this.
Mhm,
Let's look at what we can do now in order to be the
mhm.
best we can be as soon as things are speeding up again.
I think the higher up you are, the more that becomes super important
Hmm. Hmm.
so that you have clarity on how you're going to be. Like, I was listening to a conversation with the CEO of Airbnb, and he was talking about, how they lost 80% of their business during COVID. And he said that was like the darkest time in his life for him because he had people who had built this thing with him and he had to lay people off. And he was like, okay, I think something along the lines of, you know, bad companies don't change anything. Good companies overcome crisis and great companies turn crisis into an opportunity.
It's what they did.
And
They're bigger and better than ever.
and so and you see, like, and that doesn't come from let's keep doing the things that we think that we've been doing, right? If
Yeah.
80% of your business, like, you're gonna have to re-innovate your entire model,
Yeah.
right? That's a
Yeah.
new, like, how are you doing it? How are you stepping
Yeah.
forward? And that requires that you take your foot off the gas pedal and, like,
Yeah.
okay, hold on. Orientation, integration, what's going on? How do we think we need to be moving forward?
Yeah. Very interesting example. And I think it's one of the really good examples out of those last years.
Mm-hmm. And he
Yeah.
also said something really interesting because he has a background and he's an industrial designer. So he's more on the creative side of things. He says if you look at Fortune 500 companies, none of them have creative backgrounds. They're, business people or engineers. And he obsesses over the human part. Like, how do people feel? Yeah.
Oh, I
And you
love
know
it.
what he did during that crisis for the people that he laid off? He went and was cold calling people to, like, find them jobs again. He was like, hey, I have this amazing team here. And they created like even a place where they listed all of their people that they were having to lay off for
I think I
recruiters to go
remember that.
find
I
them.
think that was even on LinkedIn and stuff, that list.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he
Very
said,
interesting point.
yeah. And he said himself, he said in business, and he's the one who actually said, like, data is the language of business, but he says
Mhm.
language is the language of business. Like, how are
Mhm.
we interacting with each other? And he
Mhm.
said, if you take a body and you compare it to a company, he says a lot of companies, they're so disconnected at the head from the rest of the body. The head is
Wow.
not in touch with the heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like, how do you bring that connection, that humanness, that heart, that focus on how people are doing and how people are feeling, not only like your own people, but your customers too, just like
Mhm.
obsessing over all the details. What is that experience like, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. You brought an idea back that I wanted to discuss today with what you just said, and I
Yeah.
forgot it, and now it's back. So thank you. When you opened up this podcast with the intro about data and finance and letting go the control for a second, or letting the craziness go for a second, I think we can spend a couple of minutes on discussing how AI and generative AI is going to influence the way we work as well. Because
Curious.
we have a lot, and that closes the loop nicely with the Industrial Revolution. By now, in my opinion, we have 80% of the people in knowledge worker jobs. They're doing repetitive jobs. They're doing what people did a couple decades ago, building, or still do, like building cars, like doing the same thing. And now they do it with a laptop, and in the morning until the evening, they do the same thing, whether it is, I don't know, customer support, first level support, those things. And Elon Musk actually said something very, very true about it, that we're going to be so efficient with the acceleration of AI and robotics that the human being will get back to the point where we can use our core strength, and that is being creative and inventing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that would then be also the recommendation from my side, and I'm happy to discuss this, is if you're in a job like that, think how you can get better at that job using the technology available and start to become creative again.
Yeah,
Because
100%.
those are the jobs that will never go away. Human beings will always create, invent, and
Connect.
shape. But some of those jobs where you just do something because it's not possible to be done by a machine at this point, at some point it will be done by a machine.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be faster, it will be better. So, core recommendation I also give to a lot of young people right now is get into a role where you can be creative. Product management is a good example, for example, where you look at different trends, you like aggregate information, you make decisions, you manage, you need to have empathy. What is your thought? What is your take? Like, take a step back from the craziness and look at your job and say, hey, how can I actually get this job done faster using technology? But then what can I really do with my creativity and my brain power?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, and I think it's very accurate what you say, the only thing I would add is we go fast when we go alone, we go far when we go together. And so I would add to that too. Choose a job where you can be creative, and within that context, find how you can do it better together.
Mhm,
Like, who's your team? How are
mhm,
you making your team amazing? How are you
mhm,
showing up? You mentioned empathy. Like, I also listened to a conversation, an interview with the CEO of Bumble, who co-founded Tinder, left Tinder, sexual harassment reasons, and then went on to build like her own company and is like doing amazing.
mhm,
And she's like, what will get people through uncertainty is like knowing your why. And when you show up vulnerably and you can share why this thing matters to you
mhm,
so much and why it matters to other people, like
mhm,
customers, why this is a problem, and you can be authentic in how you show up, then that will inspire people to join the ride with you, and it will excite them. And I love the fact that you brought in the technology aspect, because I've seen how much more efficient it's made me just with the podcast alone. And
mhm,
it's freed up all this time where I can actually spend more time connecting, spend more time in the creative space, which actually makes me feel more fulfilled in what I do, because
Yeah.
there's not all of this operational workload that is consuming so much time.
Yeah.
And if you can slash that in half or even more, then, it just makes a more fun work life too.
You can get straight into value creation and into the stuff that we as human beings, we're the only species that is able to do that.
Yeah.
Like, at least on this planet. Let's see what happens in the next 100 years. But that's what makes us different, right? And we're having so many problems, so many crises, sustainability, right? Climate change that will lead to more refugee crisis. And we need every single brain on this planet to solve problems and to think about how we can become better and have a better life. At this point, we're caught up in our jobs. We're busier than ever before. Less time to think, less time to create beyond the job, because you dial in the morning at 7, you get off your laptop at 6, you get up 3 times a day to do a bio break, you run back to your laptop. And is this the life of a human being?
And I would add to that, with every technological revolution, we've gotten more busy. It's automated things, but it's not made us, it's like made us more efficient, but we're also like, look at remote work. All we do is sit at our computers and work all day long.
But that's why I said at the beginning, it made us more efficient.
Yeah.
But are we effective in what we're doing? And in my opinion, there are some fields, Silicon Valley is a great example, where it is absolutely respected. Sometimes it's even like demanded that you have your job, but you also go to like hackathons, networking events. You network, you create, you discuss problems, whether it is cybersecurity, sustainability, artificial intelligence, autonomous mobility. And that is something that is not happening in a lot of places right now, but it is something we all need in order to stay in that mode of creating a better future. And it's, in my opinion, also the reason why many of the biggest companies and the biggest disruptions and great solutions came from this area of the United States, of the world, because it's almost demanded to challenge the status quo here.
Yeah.
And to think outside of the box and not just do your job day in and day out, but to grow beyond that.
Yeah, I love that. I think if I had to summarize what we talked about today in order to let go, would be find a way to meet people where they're at. Let curiosity drive the conversation, empathy, and think big, but with the team, find a way to test small, fail fast, and learn. And that you define those structures with your team together. And it's not a weakness to focus on our humanness, and it's actually our strength. Because when we focus on how can we collaborate together and how can we connect, how can we network together, how can we really lean into what makes us so human, when what we do really well, that actually will produce better solutions to these huge problems that we're solving.
Can I add one takeaway?
Yeah.
Be a turtle.
Be a turtle?
Be a turtle.
I love that.
Yeah. That's my takeaway.
Surprised me. I was like, here's coming, like the ultimate thing is like, be a turtle.
It is the ultimate thing.
It is.
Yeah.
Go with the flow. Go where the energy is.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to step off the gas pedal and recuperate and regenerate for the next phase.
Yeah.
Love that. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a lot of fun again.
That was.
Looking forward to the next one.
Thanks for the insight, and thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Helena.